Today, we're diving into a really fascinating paradox. On one hand, you have India, this global economic giant, but on the other, it's dealing with a deep and often pretty silent social crisis. And in this explainer, we're going to explore why one specific profession, trained social work, might just be the key to bridging that massive gap.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Look at this. On one side, you've got this incredible economic engine, a $3.7 trillion economy, one of the biggest in the world. But then you look at the other side, and the reality for millions is just worlds apart. We're talking over 150 million people still living in what's known as multidimensional poverty. And that contrast, that's really the starting point for this whole conversation.
So, to really get a grip on what's happening, we need to go past the big headlines. We need to look at the data that shows the human scale of these challenges.
Let's just start with this one number, 23%. That means almost 1 in every 4 young women in India today was married when she was still a child. And a single statistic like that has huge ripple effects on everything from health and education to personal freedom.
And then there's this. Officially, over 10 million children are engaged in labor. And, everyone understands that the real number is probably way, way higher. These are kids who belong in a classroom, not a factory or a field.
Let's talk about gender-based violence. The number is about 30%. Think about that. Nearly 1 in 3 women between 18 and 49 has faced domestic violence. And here's the kicker. The vast majority of them never seek any kind of help.
Which brings us to mental health. You have nearly 200 million people suffering from mental health conditions. And for all of them, there is just one psychiatrist for every 155,000 people. I mean, that gap in care it's just hard to even wrap your head around.
So I know, hearing all these numbers back to back can feel pretty overwhelming. But here's the most important thing to remember. These are not just statistics. Each one is a person, a family, a whole community. The point here isn't to make us feel hopeless, but to make the scale of the need absolutely, undeniably clear.
So if the need is this massive, what's holding things back? Well, that brings us right to the heart of the problem, a critical shortage of the exact professionals who are trained to deal with these kinds of issues.
Now just look at this chart. The visual says it all. The United States has over 700,000 licensed social workers. The UK, with a tiny fraction of the population, has over 100,000. And India, with its 1.4 billion people, fewer than 100,000. The difference is just staggering.
But, it's not just a simple numbers game. The problem is actually way more complex than just how many social workers there are.
Let's break this down into 2 main gaps. First, you've got that raw numbers gap we just saw. There just aren't enough people to fill vital jobs in hospitals, schools, or government committees. But second, and this is huge, there's a quality and context gap. A lot of the social work training in India is still based on Western ideas that just don't fit the realities on the ground, like the caste system or specific Indian welfare programs.
Think about it this way. In India, just like pretty much everywhere else, professions like medicine and law are super strictly regulated, right? You've got professional councils that set the standards, that make sure people are competent, that hold them accountable.
So that begs a really important question. If doctors and lawyers have these councils, who regulates social work? Who makes sure a social worker actually knows what they're doing?
And the answer is, well, it's kind of shocking. No one. There is no national, legally recognized body, no Social Work Council of India. And that means literally anyone can call themselves a social worker. There are no minimum standards and no official way to hold anyone accountable. So, this leads us to the most important question of all. What's the big deal? What can a professionally trained social worker actually do that a well-meaning volunteer or any other person can't?
For starters, there's something called rights-based practice. A trained professional doesn't just show up with sympathy, they show up with pathways. They have the legal knowledge to connect a child or a survivor of violence with their actual specific rights under Indian law, like the POCSO Act. And that takes real structured training, not just a good heart.
And here's another huge difference. An untrained person might help with one crisis at a time, which is great. But a trained social worker is taught to do root cause analysis. They're trained to spot the patterns behind all the individual stories and then use that data to push for bigger systemic changes. They don't just treat the symptom, they try to diagnose the disease. And finally, there's something called ethical boundary management.
Now, I know that sounds a bit technical, but it is so important. Especially in small towns and villages, the line between your personal and professional life can get really blurry. Professional training gives you the ethical roadmap to navigate all that, to build trust, and, most importantly, to avoid causing unintentional harm.
So where does all this leave us? Well, the picture we've painted is definitely challenging, but it is not the end of the story. There's a powerful movement happening right now. You can think of the profession as being in formation, actively building a model that is truly grounded in Indian soil.
And you can see clear signs of progress. New laws, like the Mental Health Care Act, are now officially recognizing the role of trained social workers. At the same time, there's a big push to indigenize the curriculum, to ground it in the work of foundational Indian thinkers like Ambedkar. And that call for a National Social Work Council, it's getting louder and gaining more momentum every single day.
Which brings us to one last thought to leave you with. We started this whole conversation by looking at India's massive economy as a sign of its success. But it really makes you wonder, is the true progress of a society measured only by its GDP? Or should it also be measured by the strength, the respect, and the professionalism of those who care for its most vulnerable people? It's definitely something to think about.